How's it going, everybody? List of Legends here, hope you're all having an amazing day, and today I wanted to go over a topic that's been plaguing mankind for centuries, and that is how does regular show perform random humor so well? What's its secret recipe, if you will? How did it achieve such a monumental success? And that's what we're going to be figuring out on this list today. But before we dive in, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, you know all that good stuff. With all that said, let's begin. Alright, so let's talk regular show, a cartoon following the adventures of Mordecai and Rigby, who take the career paths of groundkeepers who have to live at their job and do all they can to mostly slack off. So the premise of the show is pretty simple, but also features some pretty outlandish and random plots. How is that possible? So when looking at a standard episode of regular show, let's just take the Excellent Challenge for example. In this episode, Rigby gets on a massive kick to finish a speed eating challenge called Excellent in order to win himself a trucker's hat because, you know, he thinks it's pretty cool, has a cross breeze going in the back and everything. Immediately after this, he and Mordecai head down to the restaurant in order to try and win the hat. But unfortunately, Rigby admits to Mordecai he's actually allergic to eggs, consequently leading to his coma, and leads the quest of winning the hat to Mordecai. So for the time being, Mordecai tries to just buy the hat, fails, realizes he'll have to train ultimately to win the hat, which granted he does, but with the help of the park crew. But the main takeaway from this is Skips informs Mordecai that he had a fellow park member named Jonathan Kimball who also got obsessed with winning the hat, and how he wrote every advantage he had in his notebook, which he gives to Mordecai. He also adds that John Kimball disappeared without a trace after taking the challenge. Now, it's important to take this piece of plot in mind when getting to the main randomness that's about to transpire. When the park crew heads down to the restaurant to support Mordecai, the kitchen staff immediately spots that Mordecai might actually win the challenge, and proceeds to try and stop him. Unfortunately, they're dead in their tracks by the park crew, and it's here that Mordecai all of a sudden just disappears into a voided cave, and meets someone who congratulates, but also warns that if he so happens to pick the wrong hat, he'll immediately be killed on the spot, which thankfully Mordecai flashes back to Rigby, explaining which type of hat it was, and ultimately is transported back to reality. So with the recap out of the way, let's dive into how this grade A episode was able to pull off randomness so well, because it's no secret that most cartoons don't do randomness very well, and it leaves the head-scratching question, how was regular show able to pull this off? And I think I might know the answer. See, most cartoons are primarily focused on keeping the attention of viewers by constantly throwing a silly phase or wacky frame every 2 seconds or so, when most of the time it has nothing to do with the actual main plot or storyline. Take modern SpongeBob for example. Their main play here is to constantly show us visual gags now instead of the well-balanced visual and dialogue gags they saw previously. You'd see SpongeBob's hands transform and go everywhere for absolutely no reason whatsoever. So by now I'm sure you get the main point. Most shows nowadays are driven by gag into another gag, followed by, you guessed it, another gag. It's things like this that utterly make my hand reach for the TV remote because it's no longer a plot-driven story, and immediately takes the interest out of the entire episode for me. With regular show, they didn't have problems because they used things in the plot to line up with the randomness, as explained with Mordecai being transported to a voided cave. Now, if Mordecai just so happened to be transported there without any context, then it wouldn't have worked whatsoever. But because the episode had already gave us that added mystery of what happened to Mr. Jonathan Kimball, it allowed the episode to flow and pace very well. So the main takeaway from this is context, and how it flows with the random humor taking place. And this is how regular show is able to create masterpiece after masterpiece. Of course, there is more that goes into this, which I'll be going over in my next point, which is regular show's amazing character utilization. It's here that allow the show to really shine and take advantage of not only the main plot, but also the randomness as well. So let's take a look at another episode example. For this one, how about we take a look at Diary. In this episode, Margaret asks Mordecai to water her plants, and so both Mordecai and Rigby head down to her apartment. It's here that Rigby accidentally breaks the lock off Margaret's diary, which naturally causes Mordecai to panic, since it will make it look like he busted the lock off to read it. So they both go through a ton of gags trying to repair the lock. Putting a pause on the recap real quick, notice how I said they both go through a ton of visual gags to try repair the lock. Now, I know some of you are like, but List of Legends, I thought you said gag-driven episodes were bad. What I meant was that an episode can be gag-driven, but say it with me here, they need to have context that are relevant to the plot. And here, as described, the main plot is fixing the diary before Margaret finds out. So, continuing on, Mordecai and Rigby put a whole bunch of glue on it, doesn't work. They try wiping it off, doesn't work. They put it on the grill to melt the glue off, doesn't work. It actually catches on fire and burns it. It's a sequence of gags that not only go through well, but also make sense with the plot at hand. What also helps is the incredible dynamic of Mordecai and Rigby. Mordecai is clearly under a lot of stress from this, which Rigby recognizes, but also puts it in a way where he says he'll have to bail him out once again, despite being the one to cause the problem in the first place. This dynamic really reminds me of pre-movie SpongeBob and Patrick, where SpongeBob would go to Patrick for some advice, when in reality he was just as dumb and naive as he was. But it's the same type of vibe, which I really appreciate. Anyways, they enlist the help of Skips to do a ritual in order to put back the diary the way it was. Of course, since it's a diary, it's supposed to be private. Skips explains none of them are allowed to look at the contents inside, but to no surprise, Rigby lets out a little peek, consequently causing a massive Margaret to appear and destroy the city, so now they all have to say a dark secret about themselves in order to undo the damage. Skips confesses he only skips because of his loss of a woman he loved. Mordecai admits he stole Rigby's mattress to stack them since it's just too comfortable. Finally, Rigby goes through a ton of dialogue gags confessing secrets that aren't deemed worthy enough by the massive Margaret, from eating a donut out of the trash to stealing his neighbor's bike and throwing it off the roof. Finally, they stop massive Margaret's rampage by admitting he thinks Eileen looks hot without her glasses. So the main takeaway here is not only can visual gags work well with context, but also dialogue gags as well. Here it's really shined through because of the well-written characters. Mordecai is the optimistic protagonist, Rigby is the just as dumb straight man to Mordecai, and Skips is the know-all fix-all. It's dynamics like this that work so well in establishing a good written episode. Of course, these are just 2 episodes with only about half the cast, and there are plenty more examples I could dive into, whether it's Benson the park manager screaming at the 2 knuckleheads until his gumballs explode, Skips giving them a knowledge check, Muscle Man and High Five Ghost roasting them like marshmallows, or even Pops giving them some childlike wonder. Overall, the show handles character utilization pretty darn well. Something that's also appreciated is the chill atmosphere that the series does a great job portraying. Whether it's Mordecai and Rigby trying to gain respect by getting good at video games, or Mordecai juggling his love life with Margaret, it's here that we see a sense of relation towards these characters, ultimately giving you the illusion you're right there with them. Overall, you get the point. Each character has layers to them, so you always find yourself attaching to one of them. Whether you're grumpy all the time and as you get older you relate to Benson, or maybe you're always a slacker like Mordecai and Rigby. So while the show is made on randomness, it doesn't take away from the main story at hand. You can also watch each episode and still get a good laugh and moment of seriousness, or you can take it a step further by watching the whole series, and you can see the progression of each character. An example being Mordecai's love life from Margaret to CJ to beyond. For starters, the way they handle this is absolutely beautiful, and one of the most realist moments I've ever seen in cartoon history. When Mordecai gets depressed over losing Margaret, his good old pal Rigby brings him a soda, asking if he wants to talk about it. If that isn't the most bro moment, I honestly don't know what to tell you, dude. I also like how it shows each character interacting with Mordecai after all that's happened, when Skips puts a hand on his shoulder, letting him know it's all going to be okay. It's moments like this that you really feel like the show isn't at all only mere pixels on a screen. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a hot take or anything, but I honestly enjoyed Mordecai and CJ's chemistry way better than him and Margaret. Not to say I don't like Margaret or anything, she's a really good character. But to me, CJ just felt like she had a lot more going on and the energy to match Mordecai. Unfortunately though, in good old awkward fashion, Margaret returns and it brings up some buried feelings between the two, causing CJ to storm out. I don't want to go into every single detail or anything and just recommend checking out this fantastic story for yourself. Not only these two, but Eileen and Rigby as well. Now, I'd really be kicking myself here if I didn't go over Benson and all this and how he ties into everything. Which what I'll say here is the dude is literally always stressing, and there's a good reason for this. He feels like he wasted his life being a park manager, effectively giving up on all his dreams. He's constantly getting blamed over and over for things he didn't do as a result of Mordecai and Rigby's stupidity. An example that comes to mind is Mordecai and Rigby doing dangerous stunts on the park's cart, which of course results in it being damaged, and Benson having to suffer the blame for this. He not only goes out of his way to not even fire the two on the spot, and agrees to drive 1,000 miles to fix it, all to keep his job because that's all he has. It's the same trait we see with Squidward giving up on his dreams of being a musician, but instead puts up with SpongeBob's nonsense day in and day out. Despite all of this, Benson has so many moments of being a down-to-earth guy, like admitting in front of the Universe Council just how cool Mordecai and Rigby are, or how about even giving them a raise after finally seeing the two working so hard. It's moments like this that not only show how much Benson deals with, but how much he really cares. Seeing how the show takes on real life problems really gives it that extra sense of realism mixed with its unique style. Reaching the conclusion, we see everything go hand in hand from its well written characters, perfect mix of dialogue and visual gags, the chill atmosphere, its take on real life problems, and finally relatability. All these things make up why a regular show handles randomness very well. It retains the context of the main plot without driving it into the ground. I can really see why this is one of Cartoon Network's best cartoons ever created, and why it's still a fan favorite to this very day. Of course, there are other shows such as Adventure Time, for example, that also follow this pretty well, but I'll just say straight from the jump, regular show edges it out. Alright viewers, that's the end of our list. Let me know if you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe, all that good stuff. With all that said, I look forward to seeing you with our next list.